Okay, so I've probably invested money for about 15 years onwards now, and I've made money, I've lost money, and today I want to summarize 15 years of investment and personal finance advice as if you were a beginner just starting out, just figuring things out. And really I'm making this video for my son in the future if he wants to get into personal finance and investing. Here is his dad's advice, a dad's advice to a son who wants to build wealth properly, in my opinion. And so let's not waste any time. The first word that I wrote here is ease. And I wrote that because I don't want you to complicate things, yeah? I don't want you to start out and go look at options trading, buy derivatives, do everything on margin. If it's too complicated for you at any point in time, you should not be investing in it. That's my firm opinion. To the point where you probably even shouldn't start out with individual stocks. You should probably just start simple. Index funds, target date funds. What are those? It's when you pay a small fee for people to invest in a portfolio of stocks for you and rebalance for you over time. If you don't even know what rebalancing means, then even more reason why you shouldn't invest in individual stocks, individual bonds, or derivatives like options. And if you're like, but what if I can beat the market, right? Like, what if I can beat the average? And I get that inclination in you. Like, if you're starting out, you're like, maybe I have what it takes to beat the market. And so you're reading books, maybe you're buying courses from people, you're like watching YouTube videos, you're following gurus, and you're trying to like replicate trading strategies of these people that look like they've made lots and lots of money. I'm not telling you not to scratch that itch. In fact, I welcome you to scratch that itch. You should scratch that itch. What if you have what it takes? But I'm telling you to do so after you've taken care of yourself, after you've paid yourself first, after you've put your money into an index fund or a target date fund to build wealth over the long term. And so now you're thinking, well, how much money do I put into an index fund or target date fund? Well, I'm just gonna tell you $2,000 a month. That's the minimum amount you should be aiming for. And if you cannot put $2,000 a month into an index fund or target date fund, then figure out the income part of that problem or the expenses part of that problem. That's the short answer, $2,000 a month. That will allow you to retire over the next 30 years with a fairly comfortable standard of living. Now, this number is going to change due to inflation over time, and so if you're watching this video 10 years later after it's published, then maybe it's now like $3,000 a month, yeah? But keep that in mind. The long answer is you want to work backwards. You want to ask yourself, all right, to maintain the desired standard of living that I want, how much money do I need in a portfolio so that I can safely withdraw 4% from it, or that it makes 4% after inflation and after taxes, mind you, so that I can comfortably continue to live, right? So let's give you an example. If you want a $120,000 pre-tax income, you would need $3 million in a portfolio, right? 4% of $3 million is $120,000. And it's relatively easy to get a portfolio that pays 4% in dividends or distributions and whatnot, so you can get that income. After tax, I'm just gonna ballpark it. Obviously, I'm not a licensed accountant. I just have an accounting degree, and I don't know the tax rates off the top of my head. But I'm gonna ballpark it and say, hey, 120K after tax is like 80,000 or something like that, right? And so an $80,000 per year lifestyle, if that's what you're aiming for, you need $3 million. Assuming the S&P 500 or the total stock market grows at 8% per year, how much money do you need to invest every single month over the next 20, 30, 15, 35 years to get to $3 million, right? I'm assuming 8% is inflation adjusted return, because a more realistic return on the S&P over the last 20 years is like 10 to 11%, something like that. And so there are a bunch of calculators online that will do that math for you, so I'm not going to go into it in this video. What I am going to go into is something that you will definitely come across if you decide to invest. Those are fees. There are two kinds of fees. There are transaction fees and there are management expense ratios. And the prevailing narrative right now between all personal finance gurus or creators or book writers is that you want to minimize fees as much as possible. I think that's a very one-sided track of thinking. I don't think everyone should minimize fees. I think you should think about what fees are there for. And so in my opinion, fees are two things. Number one, they are the cost of ignorance, right? It's if you don't know how to rebalance your own portfolio, if you don't know what investing is, you don't know how to diversify, then that's what fees do, right? Fees are when you pay someone else to do that for you. What I do agree with the prevailing narrative is that active funds don't necessarily outperform passive funds, and that's been the prevailing narrative. And active funds are when mutual fund managers are paid a fee to try to beat the market, and studies have shown that over time they underperform the market by the amount of fees that you pay, okay? And so, well, then you have to ask yourself, if that's the case, then why would I ever pay a fee? Why don't I just do everything myself? Well, that's what you should do. You should do everything yourself. In a perfect world, you would do everything yourself and it would all be index funds, passive investments, right? At least that's what's been working over the last 2 decades. But fees are another thing as well, right? Remember, fees are two things. Number one is the cost of ignorance, the cost of you not knowing what to do, and so you entrusting your wealth to someone else to manage. Fees are also, number two, the cost of a lack of discipline. If you're unable to control yourself, and you're putting money in individual stocks, you're putting money in options, well, it's probably better to just hand it off to someone else so they can take care of it for you, right? If you find yourself taking that extra income and you're buying a nice bag with it, or you're buying a gizmo or electronics, well, it's probably a better idea to just give that money to someone as soon as you get it so they manage it for you so it grows over time, because you don't have the discipline to manage that yourself, at least not at this point, right? And so those are two situations or two reasons why fees exist. One is for ignorance, which is one you should get rid of the ignorance, right? You should figure out how to invest and do it properly. Number two is the cost of a lack of discipline, which is also a skill. So if you build that, then there's no reason for you to pay like 1%, 2%, 3% fees to a financial advisor, which does cut into your returns over time a lot more than what you think it does cut into. And so one more point on ease. I know I said, hey, you should buy index funds, you should buy target date funds, but you should scratch your itch. And so after you've taken care of your long-term wealth building, right? Your long-term wealth building plan, $2,000 a month, $3,000 a month. So you know if you put that amount of money away every single month, you're taken care of. Then whatever you have left, well, you can buy a little individual stocks with that or buy options with that. But keep in mind that that is money you are willing to lose 100% of. Don't trade on margin, because then you'll lose more than what you put in the beginning, okay? Number three, debt. Oh, hey, margin. So what is margin? Margin is when a brokerage lends you money to trade. And if you buy something with their money and it falls below a certain value, then you have to fund your margin and essentially put more money to the brokerage, right? And there are interests you have to pay because it's debt. And so the advice that I got for myself and my recommendation to you in terms of personal finance is to never put yourself in a situation where you could get into bad debt. And in my opinion, anything aside from mortgage debt is a bad debt, right? And so are you in a situation where you could get into medical debt, right? Do you have health insurance? Are you in a situation where if something happens, you need to take that out, you need to put it on the credit card in order to like fix your car or something like that, or like help an emergency or something like that, right? If something happens in the family, do you have enough money to kind of take care of that? If you lose your job, because you never know what happens, right? Like if you can expect it, if you can see it coming, then you can prepare for it. But the thing is life, right? You can't see the future, right? So you don't know what's coming. And so if you lose your job, are you prepared for that? How much time, how much buffer room do you have to live? How many months can you live without a job, right? And so all of that is to say, the prevailing advice is 3 to 6 months of emergency funds. But if you really think about the essence of this question, the reason why we don't want to get into debt is because it's negative wealth, right? Like you're building someone else's worth, someone else's net worth, right? Because their money is compounding because of you, right? Like you're paying them an interest rate. And so we agree that we don't want to get into debt. Great. So, drop my marker. And so how do we not get into debt? Well, insurance, right? Protecting against downside risk, having an affordable insurance. If you can pay the deductible, then you can set aside that amount of money as the deductible, and then you pay a smaller premium on whatever insurance you're buying, maybe health insurance, auto insurance, home insurance. So make sure you have that in place. And then the second thing is the 3 to 6 month emergency fund, which I don't think is 3 to 6 months for some people. So for example, for myself, I'm a teacher. Teachers get hired on a yearly basis, and so I, at the very minimum, should have a 12-month emergency fund in case it does take a full school year for me to find another job somewhere else. And so it really depends on your situation, right? Like it depends on, well, what's your living expenses every month, right? Do you have a family? So you need to sit down and think to yourself, how long can I afford to not work with my savings? And is that enough time for me to replace my income? And no one can answer that question for you, but you can answer that question for yourself by applying to jobs. Yeah, like even if you have a job right now, go apply to a job, see if you'll get it, right? Like if you didn't have a job right now, right? Like if you were going to finish up your contract at the end of the year and work another job, what would it be? Go apply, go through the hiring process, but you don't have to accept the offer, right? And obviously if they do give you a good offer, you can accept it, right? And then that way you have a good idea of whether or not you're desirable in the job market, which is good to know, and two, how long it actually takes for you to get a job, right? A comparable job, right? I wouldn't aim down, right? I wouldn't be like, you know what? I'm making $100K a year as a teacher. Well, let's see if I can get a job at McDonald's. Like, let's not do that, right? Comparable or better, right? And studies have shown that people that switch jobs every 2 to 3 years, on average, make more money over time, okay? Now, one thing that is really important that I found to really kind of put my financial life back together is the spouse. This is probably the single most important decision that you would ever make in your life, and it has massive implications on personal finance. So my advice is to find a spouse that is willing to build with you, yeah? Similar values, great, right? Similar goals, great, but someone that is willing to sit there and plan with you, listen to your ideas on how to allocate wealth and give feedback on that advice. And just being able to have someone there as a filter for bad decisions, right? So not making a decision unless the both of you agrees is a really good call. And I've just found having someone there, not only does it help me make better decisions, it also gives me a reason a drive to succeed, right? To put the work in. And that is kind of my 6th point. Is I wrote income over here. And the sub point is if you marry someone you're willing to build with that you love and you're both on the same page, you have a much larger drive to increase your income, to make the best use of your time. And the reason is because growth comes from necessity and not just desire. We all desire to be rich. We all desire to have financial freedom. That's everyone's desire. But the people that take action take it because they need to do it. They feel like they need to do it. And it can come from the fact that you might have a family that you love, that you want to provide for, or any other number of reasons. But the overarching theme is you need a reason. Yeah, you need to feel like you need to do this, right? And Tony Robbins calls this a compelling vision for the future. So you need a compelling vision for the future if you want to take the actions consistently to increase your income. Whether it means creating videos like these, whether it means taking up a part-time job, starting another side hustle, or upskilling yourself with more education and changing careers. All of that comes out of necessity. And the last piece of advice, I think, is progress. Detach from the results, but mark yourself on the day-to-day. You see, all of this, everything that I talked about, at the end of the day, what people are focused on for some reason is the percentage return. How much money am I making? Am I beating the market or not? But if you focus on that, you'll realize that you would have focused on things you cannot control. Because the moment you buy a stock, you own a company that you have no control over. And yes, you made the decision, but if you base your self-worth, your value on things you don't have any control over, that's a recipe for disaster. That's a recipe for anxiety. But what do you have control over? You have control over whether or not you're working, how hard you're working. You have control over what you're actually buying. Are you putting money away every single month, right? And so that is what you focus on, the day-to-day. Are you spending money on a $7 coffee every single day? Or are you saving that money and putting it somewhere else, like an emergency fund? Are you asking your spouse for advice when you make these big financial decisions? Or are you like, you know what, like I'm gonna do it, I'm gonna be so emotional, right? I remember when I was young, in my former years, I went out drinking with my friends, and afterwards I came back and I had a few drinks and I'm like more welcoming to risk, right? Like everyone's more welcoming to risk when they've had a few drinks, right? And I bought a stock. I was like, I'm gonna buy it, I'm gonna do it. It's a new company, IPO, iQIYI, Chinese video streaming platform. I bought the stock and I doubled my money. I doubled my money. But that same mentality lost me money the next time I bought another stock, right? And so like now I have a wife that says, Leon, you're making a horrible decision. What are you doing, right? Are you in a position to get out of debt or not get into debt? Are you making progress towards this secured position every single day? Are you building your moats, right? Are you building a wall in between yourself and debt? Are you learning, right? Or are you paying the cost of ignorance or the cost of a lack of discipline, right? Because if you care about progress, then you will be disciplined. If you care about results, you might not be disciplined. And lastly, are you doing something that feels easy to you, right? Because for some people, options trading is easy, right? And all to them, but you shouldn't base your life on them, right? You should base your life on you, right? So objectively, the best decision is passive investments over time, because most retail investors average 2% return. And the reason is because they're making decisions when they don't need to make decisions, okay? That's it. Have a great day.